I'm so far from perfect. I will always be so far from perfect. And I know that. I know I'm not superior to anybody because I have overcame alcoholism or I have left alcohol behind. That does not make me superior to anybody. But I do believe my experiences that I had with my trauma were for an absolute reason to help others.
All right, Shelby, I just want to start off by saying, seriously, just being authentic and real, it's such a blessing to be able to be here with you. Like when I went through my divorce, you had called me like literally like the week that I was getting divorced and it was like finalized. And you were like, hey, let me train you. Like, let's see if like it would be a good fit. Because you had tried a couple times before and I was like, oh, no, I don't want to do all that. And it was just totally like God's timing, you know, like how you reached out and you were like, hey, I'd love to train you. It was such a blessing in my life. And it was like the one consistent thing I had throughout like my whole divorce. So I just want to tell you, I'm so lucky to be here with you, genuinely. And I'm so grateful for you and like the influence you've had on me in my life. And you're just a gem. Seriously, you're so fun. You have great energy and your story is amazing.
Thank you. No, seriously, I'm pumped to be here. I've been thinking about it all week ever since you said that you'd make the drive down here, and I'm honored to say this is my first podcast that I've ever been on, and I'm so happy that it's yours. And the reason I love working with people of your characteristics, and even if you've gone through a hard time, like I know you have that drive inside you, and I can relate to that. And I also know that just transcends into success. And even though you were going through it, like really through it, I knew you were going to come out the other side a better person, a better man, and you were going to grow from it.
Yeah, and no, and your story is amazing. And you say like this is your first podcast, and like when you said that, my first thought was like your voice needs to be heard. And I mean that genuinely. So like when I think about trauma and like overcoming trauma and then just like what it takes to overcome trauma, I mean, your story is literally like a perfect example of like literally going through hell. And you know, like which you'll share all these things, but to be at where you're at right now, given what you've gone through, is insane. I mean, how old are you again?
28.
Yeah, so you're 28 years old, very young. I mean, like it's like you've had a ton of success in your career. You're building your own business now and your own online fitness coaching program that's doing amazing. And you've also had many, many trials. And so it's like to be at where you're at, given what you've gone through, it could have been so easy for you to be living a completely different life than where you're currently at. And I just admire you and respect you for being as vulnerable as you will be and for sharing what you're going to share, because I know it's not easy. But you have a safe place here with us in our community to see you and respect you and admire you for being willing to share. Walk us a little bit just through who you are, you know, who's Shelby, like where you're from, and just so we have a little bit of context to your story from the beginning.
Okay. To give you a little bit of background as to like who I am. So I grew up in Minnesota and I lived there my entire life, 24 years. I went to high school there, went to college there. Like that was my hometown. And I basically came to a situation where I needed to move out of that environment, and wasn't exactly my plan, but it was someone else's plan. And that person had a much bigger and much better plan than I could see at that time. Even though, and I'll start from kind of, I guess, a little bit of backstory in terms of like me growing up and like kind of who I was to give an idea of kind of who I am to my core. I was always somebody who was wanting to win at things, but also like let the other person win. So I kind of like battled between being the kind girl and being like the high achieving, I want to beat everyone and I'm super competitive girl. And I battled between that. And now that I see that, like I see that as such a blessing, and it's helped me help so many other women and so many other clients and so many other men in my coaching services too. But basically I grew up as a very active little girl. Like I was always outside, always wanting to do things, always wanting to just try to get the most out of life. Even as a little girl, like I would be swimming in my pond in the backyard like that we grew up in, and like the neighbors would be looking at me like I was crazy. Me and my neighbor would go out in the pouring rain and go save worms that were drowning in the rain, but it's like that was our fun as kids, and we were always just trying to make the most out of our day, out of our life. And then come high school, I was always very active, like I've already mentioned, but I loved sports. Sports was kind of like my identity, I would say,
For
at
sure.
that time in high school. But I was also held to a pretty high standard, growing up and being on this kind of high team as a young person. I was expected to have a lot of energy every single day. I was going from hockey practice straight after a full school day to doing my hockey practice to immediately my dad picking me up and driving me an hour across town to do soccer practice. And that was just like my normal day to day. And it was like a normal go to go energy. And then I burnt out.
Like listening to your story, I was super similar. It's like so easy to get so caught up in putting our identity into like these things that we get put into when we're young, which is like sports. You know what I mean? Like my whole identity was I was an athlete. And then I tore my ACL multiple times in high school and I lost that. And it was like, who am I now? And I like pick up the guitar and I like didn't even really like it, but it was just like I had to find something else. And that's what like I've like learned so much through this too, is like it's so important to find identity in like everlasting things, right? Which is like God, which is like a lot of other things that we can talk about. So I totally understand where you're at, where like you're putting your identity in all these sports, you're held to a super high standard. Was it your dad that held you to that high standard? Was it yourself? Like what held you to such a high standard at such a young age?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And I don't think I've ever actually even thought about it, but it definitely wasn't my parents. My parents were always very much like, Shelby, do what you want, and we support you. Like, my parents are the most supporting people ever. When it came to the sports, I think it was just the pressure that I put on myself, where it's like, I saw my talents. I knew I could maybe make it, kind of far with one of these sports, but decision making was not my strong suit back then. But I think it was just to prove something to myself.
And probably like
life.
your competitive nature too.
Yeah. 100%. But I do think kind of mid high school, it ended up being to like prove something to myself that I could make it or I was worth something. And I think this just came from my own expectations on myself and like the environment that I grew up in. And I don't think that my family had any type of pressure on me when it came to that. They were so supportive and just wanted us to be happy, really. My brother and my sister are extremely smart, extremely intelligent. Like, my brother is definitely like near Einstein level smart. Like, it's like crazy. But my sister's also extremely smart too.
And you're the youngest of those two?
Yep.
So you were like probably constantly trying to compete with them. And then you're competitive by nature anyway. And then you love sports. And then you're a go-getter. So like just the combination of multiple things, like you were just going full force into life.
Exactly.
Which you said leads you to like this downfall, or like you said, a burnout, right? Which was kind of what instigated a little bit of like a time of your life that was difficult, or kind of walk us into that part of your story then.
So I'll actually start kind of from before high school, even in elementary school. Like, I knew I was an athlete, kind of. I was always, having the girl with the most mile time at recess. We would like have these little chips for every lap we would run at recess, and I always had the most like out of my class, and I always like had a pretty good mile time, and all those things. We would play Red Rover, and I was always like the one speeding, like that type of stuff. I knew I was an athlete at that time, but I also saw myself as a little bit of a bigger girl than some of the other girls who were also similarly just as athletic as me. And I would notice myself, whether that's like getting winded and so forth, doing some of these games. And as a kid, someone in elementary school, like, you'd think that they wouldn't really connect that, but I did. And it didn't feel right that they could potentially beat me at some point, or even were already beating me, even at these silly elementary games. And I also just saw that they would get attention from guys and so forth. And so they were smaller than me, like size-wise, but not by much, by like very, very little. And that actually ended up eventually triggering my first eating disorder in 5th grade. And it really was more of, it wasn't, I would say, diagnosed as anorexia, but if a doctor probably did assess me, it probably would have been pretty close to anorexia. And I basically just wouldn't eat like anything throughout the day, or I'd try to not eat for as long as I possibly could. And eventually I would binge like cereal or something like that. And it came like to light when the lunch ladies just saw me playing with my food with a fork at lunch. And then they pulled me aside one day before class, and they're like, Shelby, the lunch ladies are noticing this, like, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. I'm in 5th grade. How am I supposed to know how to describe this thing?
And you probably weren't self-aware enough at the moment to realize what, like, oh, I was actually like comparing myself to other people, and so I'm not going to eat.
Exactly.
So yeah, what did you tell them?
I honestly just stood my ground and I was like, I'm just not hungry. But like, I also knew in the back of my mind, I was forcing myself not to eat, but I was like almost convincing myself I wasn't hungry, thinking that's what was going to make me lose weight. And at this point in 5th grade, like they start kind of talking about health a little bit, but I still wasn't, old enough to be able to be aware that that was really what the solution was going to be to reach whatever desires Shelby had at that age. And I eventually grew out of it in 5th grade, and I became, more of a normal eater. I would say middle school, I had the best relationship with food in middle school, and then it resurfaced again. The eating disorders resurfaced again in high school.
Well, because so much of like trauma too, like will continuously resurface if you don't do the inner work, where it will like forever not resurface to that same level. You know what I mean? And it's like, you obviously didn't do the work when you're in 5th grade, but it's still in your body a little bit. And then it comes back years later. And it's like, hearing your story, it just makes me see again, like the importance of like these things start at such a young age, and like parents like have to be on the offense. You know what I mean? It's just like, I think a lot of times parents don't realize like what children are like actually experiencing as they're growing up at such a young age. You know what I mean? And it's just like, if we can as parents play offense to these things, like and like get ahead of the problem. Otherwise, like people are going to run into all these traumatic events and eating disorders. And like, I mean, pornography is thrown at you at such a young age now. It's like, if you don't get ahead of it before, you're just going to fall into the habits of like your subconscious mind, which is usually negative, and like your worst self, which I can totally understand, like where you're at in your mind at that moment. Where you've explained it very clearly. It's like you're constantly comparing yourself to your older siblings, and then it's just like you're comparing yourself to the kids at recess. Then you get into sports in high school, and like the older kids are more fit because they've had more time to work out. And then also like you play hockey, and like, which is like a very, like you said, it can be a very masculine thing. You know what I mean? So it's like those multiple different areas influencing you in that one thing of like your eating habits. I can absolutely see how that like would cause like this traumatic, like, relationship with food. And so you go through high school, and I imagine it continues and it leads on to other problems, or like how does that continuously progress?
Yeah, I mean, when the eating disorder like kept resurfacing, and it was in different ways that it would resurface, it was either with like me trying to eat absolutely nothing, or me trying to like very much perfect macros and like wouldn't allow myself to go over like a gram of fats that like MyFitnessPal gave me, some type of like toxic behavior like that, in my view, toxic behavior. So it was either things like control over that, and when it just became too hard to manage or sustain, I kind of just like turned to numbing. The best thing that I found in college, and this was the best thing at that time in my life, but was alcohol. And I discovered how freeing that made me feel. And not even in college, just actually I discovered alcohol in high school, and I definitely felt that sense of relief from the thoughts, from the obsessing over the body image, from obsessing over trying to be the best at sports, from trying to just push myself to this level that I don't think was ever really sustainable or even plausible for Shelby to even like ideally look at as, something to reach at that time. There was just too much pressure on me, and then all of a sudden it like blew up.
So obviously you're going through like this very difficult relationship with food that's like now causing you to drink, right? And like you're turning to that for all like the escape. Was there like anything else in your life that had gone on or was going on that like also made you like want to numb everything that you were feeling, or was it mostly just that? Or like, for me, like a lot of times when I've had traumatic experiences, it's just like one kind of leads to another, and then like all of a sudden you have like 4 traumatic things you're balancing, and it's just like, alcohol will give you a good time through it, you know? So it's like, was it just the eating habits that you had, or was like there anything else going on?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I've like dabbled on sharing this, whether that's like in a public place or like space at all. But I've talked about it through therapy like numerous times, and I'm so open about it with individuals, and I'm so open about this experience when people ask me. And it's something that I wasn't even sure that I was about to touch on come this podcast, to be honest, because it's something that is very personal to me, but it's also a very important subject that I feel God just wants me to touch on, to whether that's impact another woman or tell another woman that she's okay and she's not in the wrong. And essentially what had happened in early high school, and I don't even know if this was my freshman year or my sophomore year of high school at this point. I know trauma can kind of blur things like that, and with what I can remember, I think it was 15, 16, so it had to be freshman, sophomore year. But I went on a cruise with some of my friends, and, I've never drank at this point, never drank alcohol. Like, I was kind of like a good girl. Like, I was a good kid. I was a good, athlete. I was a good person that was like a member of all these teams. And we had decided like we were gonna, try a couple beers during this cruise. Like, why not? It's kind of, it was just our decision to do that, and it was my decision.
And you're on this cruise with just friends.
Yeah, just friends.
Yeah, so it's like no parent supervision.
No, there was parents. Yeah,
but you were gonna do it when they're not there, obviously.
Yeah.
You just go have fun and see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
We had our own kind of room too at this point, and the parents had their own room. So it's like we were with them, but like we were also just kind of doing our own thing. But yeah, I decided to have a couple beers. I wasn't really a fan of it, to be honest. Like, I didn't like it. But then it became like the second to last day of the cruise, and like we were deciding to drink again. And this time we decided to do it with people like on the cruise boat, where it was like these people that we didn't know. So we kind of met this group of individuals that we didn't meet before the cruise, and this is our like last night on the cruise. And we had a couple beers with them and a couple drinks in their room. All I remember really is having a beer in a room and then going to what they kind of called like more of the club area on the cruise. And that's when everything kind of blurs. And this is kind of where I'm going to just mention very slightly, like trigger warning, and I'm going to talk about sexual assault here for a moment. And I am going to do it in a way where I'm not going to share all the details, but I'm going to share what I think is extremely important for other women and other men, honestly, to hear about this experience. But essentially what had happened on that last night was I was sexually assaulted and I was roofied. And I have battled.
For those that are listening, roofied just means you were drugged?
Drugged.
So someone put something in your drink.
Essentially. And I have battled with myself trying to justify this situation and how I was the one in the wrong for so long, and trying to make it all my fault. But the more flashbacks I have on the situation, the more I've talked about in therapy, like, there's just absolutely no way that this situation was my fault. And it's not like we drug tested me and we're like, oh, she was roofied. But essentially how the situation unfolded, to basically make a long story short, was I had woken up in an unknown area on this cruise ship to my friend basically screaming into this guy on top of me, and all I heard my friend saying was, get off of her. And I was completely paralyzed in that moment, and all I remember seeing was him bolt. And from that situation, from that moment, I just remember not being able to move my body, and I don't know if I was in shock. I don't know if it was because of maybe the drugs in my system or whatever it was. But I just remember being wrapped in a towel, and my clothes were ripped at that point, as to what my friends were telling me. I remember being wrapped in a towel, and some of the other people who we trusted carried me back to the room with my girlfriends. And all I remember is throwing up. All I remember is crying profusely, like I could not stop. But I could not figure out what had just happened. I don't know, again, like if this was shock, if this was drugs or whatever it is, but I think the most important thing to say here is that, like, this situation was not my fault. This situation was not because I decided to drink a beer. This situation was not because we decided to introduce ourselves to people. This situation was because an individual took advantage of me.
Yeah, and abuse you.
And abused me, yeah.
Right. And I just want to say, Shelby, that I absolutely admire you for being courageous enough and vulnerable enough to share that. I can imagine it'd be difficult, and like you say, you're open to it, but it's also hard to share, like knowing it's going to get shared everywhere. So I just admire you, and I want you to know that, like, I see you, and there are many people that will see you and like will hear your story and know that it wasn't your fault, and that, like, this was a serious traumatic event that you have had to work through, and have had, like you said, years of therapy through. Mm-hmm. So I just want you to know you're incredible for sharing, like being willing to share that, and also being vulnerable enough and courageous enough to do that. But I just want you to know we see you and like we care about you. Seriously, those are hard things to feel, share, and work through. So thank you. Seriously. So
Yeah.
you have this experience that's just like horrible that not many people understand. And how do you like I mean, what does life turn into? Like, so on top of that, on top of the eating habits, like you go on this cruise in high school and you also have this like traumatic event that like, I mean, I imagine also probably influenced you to want to drink, to numb everything, right? Or like, what does that look like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that part of I'm going to try to own this as a traumatic experience, even though my brain has tried to tell me for so long that this wasn't whatever, Shelby, you're just like justify, like I'm going to own that this was a traumatic experience.
Absolutely
and that this
traumatic.
happened to me.
And your feelings and your emotions and everything that you've experienced through it is real, and they're completely justified. They're completely valid. And it's just like anyone that understands that knows that like your feelings are real and that was absolute trauma that you had to face and very difficult experiences that were not your fault, that like you should just, like you say, absolutely own that this was like a very traumatic thing for me,
100%. And at that time, as a 15, 16-year-old, not being able to connect the dots as to like what had just happened, but like also going back to school basically that next day after we got back from the cruise, because it was the last night of the cruise. All of a sudden we're all going back to school, and my friends all knew what the situation was. I knew what the situation was. It was nobody's fault other than the person who chose to kind of basically abuse me, but it was no one's fault for like, we didn't know what the situation even was or what to do about it. Like, that's not anybody's responsibility to know. And I just want to put that out there in case any of my friends who end up listening to this feel bad or feel like they could have done more. I want to tell you, absolutely not. There was nothing in that situation that you could have prevented this person's evil actions from basically pursuing from. Though what I want to mention too is like that experience in itself, yes, that was traumatic, but not only did that traumatic one-time experience happen, it was what happened afterwards, where there ended up becoming a rumor in my high school. And again, this is when I was 15, 16 years old maybe, but the rumor was that Shelby had lost her virginity on a cruise ship, but nobody knew what actually had happened. Nobody actually knew the situation that unfolded other than me and my friends that I was on that ship with.
What was your initial reaction when you heard that was like the rumor going around? Because I can't even imagine being through such a traumatic experience. Obviously, you didn't choose it. And then now, like, the complete opposite is getting passed around, that, like, you lost your virginity. Like, what was your initial feelings and emotions when you heard that?
I think there was an ongoing pit in my stomach for probably at least that first 6 months that I was back in school, because this rumor spread very fast and very loud, and they came through voices of people that I thought were my friends and I thought were close to me. And I also want to preface where it's like, I am not justifying these people's behavior of harassment, of spreading rumors or anything to that nature. We were kids, I do understand that, but there were also people who saw my reaction when people would give me quote unquote shit about the situation and took me aside and asked me what the hell actually happened, Shelby. And there ended up being a few people that I was able to trust, to confide in enough to tell them what had actually gone on. Because there were mature people in high school, actually, believe it or not, but there still were some just not developed at that time to be able to understand, like, that's just not the thing to do. I don't blame anyone in high school for giving me shit, to be honest. Like, it was a time where everybody gave everybody shit. And I don't think that my friends were honestly trying to actually hurt me. I just think like that was just, unfortunately, people's maturity level and behavior at that time. Though what had happened when I kept being teased about this subject is I would revisit that experience over and over and over and over and over again. And this would happen sometimes multiple days or multiple times a day during the school day. And I was like, I just want it to be over. I just want it to be over.
I can't even imagine like the mental state that would put you in. Like it's just like they're twisters in your mind that just grow bigger and bigger and louder. So like what did you do to cope with those thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think I did much because I didn't know. And I also didn't see anybody in the wrong at that time. Like, I just thought people were giving me shit, but it also buried that back in my mind that that was my choice during that time on that cruise ship to have had that situation happen to me. Because of the way that people were wording it, I almost started to believe it. And then I played along with it. I didn't know how else to deal with that type of harassment at that age, being told something had happened to me in the way that it actually didn't happen to me. I had no idea how to take that and say anything back.
Right. Or like how to navigate through it, right? I mean, you're 15, 16 years old. It's like you go through one of the most traumatic events that anyone at any age you could experience that would like really rattle their world in a very traumatic way. And then on top of that, people are, in your face making fun of you. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, you have like eating disorders. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's so much on your plate at such a young age, and like your emotional intelligence and your emotional maturity and awareness isn't there enough to like be able to do the inner work. So it's just basically, I can imagine just building up, festering. Like, did you talk to someone that like that you love and respect, like a parent, about what was going on? Or like, did you keep it internally inside?
Yeah, no, I never talked to an adult about it. I do know that there was times that I tried, in terms of that was as far as I was able to get myself, but I had scheduled times with like the school counselor, because I knew something wasn't right with the way that I was feeling, because Shelby was always the bubbly, go-lucky, super happy girl. Like, people legit knew me like that in high school. That all of a sudden started to take a really 360 turn come like my junior year of high school. I didn't even recognize myself. I didn't even recognize the feelings that I was feeling. And the only thing that I could pinpoint back to why it felt so deep and so dark at that time was because of that past trauma, or that consistent trauma that I was continually re-experiencing, didn't know how to navigate. And it just really blurred what was right versus wrong in my brain, and it confused the heck out of me. And I think,
like, what was actual reality and what wasn't reality, like what
Exactly.
happened and what didn't happen. And it's just like, when you're in such a broken and like manipulated state, like, you don't even know what the truth is anymore. It's because it's just like, what actually happened, you're getting constantly told in your brain, is different than what actually happened. It's like you forget what actually happened. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like, did that lead you down? Because like, I know that like a lot of like, so between that and between your experiences and your relationship with food, you turned to drinking very consistently, right? Like out of high school, right? So out of high school, you're in college, and you just start like, I mean, are these feelings resurfacing? You haven't done the inner work to heal, so you just like start to drink consistently. Absolutely. Or like, how does like everything you've been through now channel your relationship with alcohol?
I would say the alcohol abuse honestly started probably more immediately after that situation.
In high school?
Yeah, in high school.
You started drinking pretty heavily in high school because of it?
I did. And it wasn't sustainable in a way, because I was in so many sports where it's like, I knew I had to be careful with how much I was doing it. But when I got the open window, I didn't have games on the weekend. I didn't have anything that I had to wake up for in the next morning or practice. I was definitely looking for the party, or I was definitely looking for the place to drink, or the people who partaked in those things at that time. And it got to a point where I knew it was bad. I knew that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing at that age, and I knew that wasn't what I wanted to be doing, or what I was supposed to be doing, to be honest. And essentially what had happened from then was, come then my junior year of high school, that's when I was like, no, I'm done drinking. And I think I actually stayed completely sober like that year of my junior year for like at least 6-9 months or something like that. And then I would drink every now and then, but this was also during the time that I had my eating disorder resurface, and I was controlling food, and I was also controlling my grades. And I was not like a school friendly type of smart. I wouldn't even say that. I just didn't care about school. I genuinely did not care about grades, and I just cared about more so sports and my friends at that time. I never really tried in school, but I wanted to prove people wrong. I would kind of get made fun of for being the dumb blonde. I would get made fun of for being the person who didn't have common sense and all of that. And I wanted to prove people wrong. So come my junior year, I made it a pact to myself, not only to like stay away from the alcohol and control that and control the food and get myself like back to the body that I thought was, you know, how it was supposed to look. But I decided to get on the A honor roll too. I'm like, I'm going to prove all of you people wrong that I can do this if I really want to. I just don't want to. So I ended up getting, I think it was like all A's and one B. So I don't think I actually made the A honor roll, but it was like, okay, no, like I just proved like, no, I can do this if I want to. I just don't care to do this. This isn't interesting to me.
Like you weren't even doing it for yourself, right? Like you're doing it to just, again, find the validation that you were seeking, which was whether it was through your body, whether it was through proving to people that you were a good person and like you weren't sleeping around on a cruise, or whether it was for, hey, look at me like I'm worth something, like, and I have actual value, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you were seeking all your validation from like these external, you know, like sources, versus like, again, doing that inner work. But like, who can blame you when you're so young and you have so much like trauma, but like you don't even know how to process it, and you don't have like a mentor that's like going to stop you and help you navigate through it. So I can imagine as the years go on, it gets like, because you end up falling back into alcohol, right? And then it gets progressively worse, right?
Yep.
Like walk us through that. Like walk us through where it progressively got worse and what that looked like.
So yeah, then come like senior year of high school, I kind of, the eating disorders weren't as strict. They were definitely still there on the surface, but I was eating more. I didn't look extremely unhealthy, and I didn't have like the 7% body fat anymore. And I was basically gaining a healthy amount of weight. And then I started to partake in drinking again. And come college, this only got, you know, intensified, because we all know how college goes for most of us. And I had the time of my life, but also the worst time of my life, because this brought me that temporary relief from the thoughts, from the trauma, from thinking about my body image. But then it would always leave me worse off. And then I would almost drink and pick back up the substance again the next weekend or the next time or the next Wednesday to numb that again, for feeling like a piece of garbage, basically, for doing all that. And it just like continued, but it was the norm. And nobody questioned how much you really drank in college, unless you were like completely not waking up and never going to class, which I did. There was like, I didn't really miss class. I did well in college. Like I didn't have a bad experience in terms of grades or in terms of like education wise in college. I did pretty well, but the drinking was what I always looked forward to. And I didn't think that it was ever really an issue because of how much everybody else was drinking around me. And so, and I'm going to touch on too, when I knew there was a moment that I probably wasn't normal with my relationship with alcohol, but it didn't start to affect my life. I was almost like a functioning alcoholic at that point for a temporary period of time.
And then it eventually caught up. And so like when it caught up, what did that look like?
Mm-hmm. So eventually after college, I was still kind of drinking the same way that everybody drank in college. But that's usually when people die down a little bit and like start to like build their life. And I was like, what the heck is everybody doing? Like, I still want to go out. I want to have fun. I was hanging out with people I did not care to hang out with just because I knew they were going to the bar that weekend, just because I knew they were drinking. So I was also surrounding myself with people who were not aligned with me, who were not aligned with like who I should be or wanted to actually deep down surround myself with. And that,
like the alcohol was governing your life, literally, who you hung out with, what you did, and where you went.
Yeah, exactly. And anytime that there was a drink or people were drinking, I always wanted to basically take that opportunity up, and I wanted to, no matter who it was with or where it was at, I didn't care. I just cared if there was alcohol there. And I would have like friends that would go on like hiking trips and stuff, but it's like they weren't drinking or anything. I'm like, that doesn't sound fun. Like, is there going to be alcohol there? Like, it became like fun did not exist unless there was alcohol in my life. And that I kind of like pinpointed, maybe there's something wrong, but there were still some people that drank kind of similarly to college.
And so like you're saying that turns like into this time where you were like drinking every day, right? You told me about that.
Yeah.
And then like eventually like you have so much alcohol in your system, like you're almost like on your deathbed, right? And you're like end up in the hospital. Like how tell me about those days when you were literally every day in the hospital. Like what was that like?
Yeah, no, that's it progressed pretty fast, I would say, when COVID hit. So when COVID hit and we were all isolated, I didn't have the people to go out to with the bars anymore. I didn't have people to go to the bars anymore because bars were closed. But you know what they kept open? Liquor. For some reason, they kept the liquor stores open. And I was like, oh, well, I can still have my fun with liquor. And I continued to drink the same way, if not worse, because I was alone and because I didn't have people to talk to. Like, I was just drinking nonstop. And I thought it was fine, at first, until it wasn't fine. And, I did kind of have a break from it where it's like I released from the alcohol a little bit, but then it would always come back. It would always come back stronger. And there came a time where I had already gone to treatment 2 times for my alcoholism. And these first 2 times, I also don't think I wanted to be sober. I also remember my first time in treatment, I asked people, I was like, okay, so like, when can I try just one again? Like just one drink again?
Like you were in there and already looking forward for the time that you could drink again.
Exactly. I didn't understand that. I didn't even understand addiction. I didn't understand sobriety. I didn't understand alcoholism. I didn't understand the dependency on alcohol. But I just thought that I was going to treatment to learn how to moderate my drinking.
Okay.
And I was in for a big surprise because that's not what I needed. I was at a point with my drinking where it had completely taken over my job, my relationships with my family. My family started not to trust me. My friends. I was completely alone, and all I cared about was the alcohol. The alcohol became my higher power. There was no praying for me during that time. There was no talking to God. I just cared about the drink and about the alcohol, and I was so determined to figure out a way to moderate it where it's like I could be a normal person and drink again. And I continued to try. When I got out of rehab, I would try to drink. It would always resurface back to the hospital trips. It would always resurface back to the detox trips where it's like there was a point too, Matt, where I remember, and it was either 3 or 4 times, but back-to-back days, I was drinking in my apartment alone, and it would get to the point where I couldn't speak. I could hardly see my phone. I knew I got to the point of oblivion, and I would call the ambulance on myself. I would call 911, and I would be like, I need help. And they would come and get me from my apartment, carry me out on a stretcher, bring me to the hospital, and I would sober up for, 24 hours, and then they would release me. Immediately, I would go to the liquor store the first time I could get a chance to go. And if my car wasn't there, I had Uber. And I would go and I'd be sitting in that parking lot early in the morning until they opened. And I'd grab those liters of vodka and I'd do it all over again. And there was, I think it was somewhere around 3 or 4, I want to say, times that I called an ambulance on myself, went to the hospital 3-4 times in a row. Every single time I checked into that hospital, Matt, I had a lethal level of alcohol in my system, meaning I should have been in the coma. I could have died. I should not be breathing.
That's insane.
But somehow I was still breathing. And the hospital kind of looked at me and they brought me to the detox center, and the professionals looked at me and they're like, you are a risk to yourself and to other people because of you can't control yourself around the substance. The substance became what controlled me. And I had no idea what they were talking about. I'm like, no, I can moderate it. I just didn't care. And I was drinking like that on purpose. And they're like, oh, okay, really, Shelby? You were drinking? Were you trying to die then? And when they said that to me too, I was like, no, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And they're like, well, let's look at these papers, because the last 4 visits in here, Shelby, you had a lethal level of alcohol in your system. And any one of these nights, you could have and you should have been dead. So if you're telling me that you don't want to die, you're going to have to admit that this has a hold on you and that you can't drink alcohol. And that was when it kind of clicked.
It clicked in that moment, like, wow, like you finally came to terms with I have a problem, and this is a problem that I can't just, and through discipline and willpower, overcome or control.
Absolutely.
So that was that point of your rock bottom where you're just I have a problem, I need to do something about it. Mm-hmm. So then now walk us through your healing process. What do you do to so from there on out to get to where you are now? Do you turn to therapy? What do you do? Do you go to detox, rehab? What do you do to get out?
So from that point on, I decided that I needed to change up my environment, my people, the people that I was surrounding myself with, the environment that I was in, people, places, and things. It's kind of what they talk about. And I needed to change all of that in order to have a fresh start. And that's actually when I came to Florida to go to treatment down here. And at that time, like I still had my job back in Minnesota, and I was planning to go back to my apartment back there, and I still had my apartment back in Minnesota. And basically what had happened was like I realized when it came close to like me being kind of like released from the treatment center, or like being able to complete the program and leave, I realized I don't want to go back there. I've tried. Apparently that doesn't work. I need to try something new.
Yeah, you didn't want to go back to that same environment that was so toxic.
Yeah.
So you stayed in Florida?
So I stayed in Florida, and ever since I moved to Florida, ever since I stayed here, I have not had a sip of alcohol, and it's coming up on 4 years now. And it blows my mind, but I know for a fact I needed to go through everything that I did in order to get to the other side, in order to, reach the greener grass, essentially. Like all of what I went through, I absolutely know how to reason to it at this point in my life. And to give you more clarity as to like how I got to where I am today.
I just want to say first that it's absolutely amazing that you were 4 years sober. Seriously, like to be addicted as to alcohol as you were, for it to be such like not only an addiction for fun, but also just like such an escape to all your problems too. Like it's like you love doing it for fun, but then you also like need it for all your trauma. It's just like for you to like move here, go through rehab, give it up completely, and then to stay 4 years sober is absolutely insane. I mean, there's just very few people that can actually do that. And I just absolutely admire you and respect you for being able to do that. And it sounds to me like though, like a lot of the work that you were able to do to get to where you're at was like you finally started labeling your traumatic experiences, right? Because like you realized you had this problem with food. You realized that like you had this traumatic experience in high school that like left you completely broken, that you were numbing. It's like because you can now say that you have all these problems, that you've worked through them, and then like even ways that you talk to yourself about those problems, you're like rewiring in your head.
Yeah.
So it's like walk me, because so many people that have trauma think like just brush under the rug for years is gonna solve the problem. It's just like it's like a thorn inside your soul, and it's just like they just will avoid it till like it's like you're on your deathbed almost drinking to avoid it. But then like the only way through that trauma is to like sit and look at it, to label it, to spend time with yourself, to become comfortable with it, to where you can finally start to heal from it. So it's like, it sounds like you've done years of work through therapy, through rehab, through what else? Like walk me through like these 4 years of healing that you've been able to do. Because I just want to say one last thing too. Like it's absolutely amazing that like you're a fitness coach and you trained me literally for months on how to eat healthy. And you for years struggled to eat healthy and had a poor relationship with food. But you took that event and you are now changing lives on the other end, which is like absolutely amazing. To like, it's literally turning your trauma into triumph, and it's turning your ashes into beauty, And then it's just like, now everything that you went through with that very traumatic experience with that abuser in high school, it's like you're now at a point that you're willing to talk about it to help others that are going through that. So it's like you've absolutely taken what you've been through and you're like, I'm going to use this and I'm going to own it and I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to use these things to help others, which that right there means like you've done the work. So like walk me through the work that you've done to like help the individual that's at where you're at, like get out, because we best serve the people that we once were. You can best serve the person that you once were. Like what would you tell that individual? Like how did you get out so they can also get out?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such a great question and a loaded question, but I'm going to try to condense it as much as I can because there's so much to it. And there was so many different angles that I worked at over the last 4 years to get myself to the side that I am at now. And let me preface too, before I go into any of this, I'm so far from perfect. I will always be so far from perfect. And I know that. I know I'm not superior to anybody because I have overcame alcoholism or I have left alcohol behind. That does not make me superior to anybody. But I do believe my experiences that I had with my trauma were for an absolute reason to help others. And I have seen this even just through the multitude of people that DM me on Instagram about how do you stay sober? Like, how do you stay sober, Shelby? I need help. That is like one of my favorite messages because I know exactly where they're at and I know I have that experience to be able to help them. And it is just because I share it too on social media. I share about my sobriety. I share about kind of my story that people feel comfortable being able to ask me about that. Like, I know God had me go through all this for a reason, and I know it's to help other people. I know that to my core.
Which just speaks volumes of you, because there's so many people that go through similar things, and like alcoholism and like it's a victim mentality of like, I'm stuck like this forever, like I'll never be able to heal from this, and like they go down very dark paths. And the fact is, though, they were a victim to someone's abuse. But I'm not saying they're not a victim in that sense. I'm saying in the sense that like they can't find the healing and like the life that they once wanted because of what they went through, which is false. Like, you were living a beautiful life, a life that you were very proud of because of what you went through, And so like when you get those messages on Instagram that say like, how do you stay sober, or like, what do you tell them?
The biggest thing that I wish somebody told me early on, because I played that victim role for a very long time in my first couple of rehabs that I went to. Like, it's not me that's the issue, but it's my responsibility. It's my responsibility to get myself out of it and to basically find the solution. I am my only person that I can rely on. And until I was able to put it through that lens, nobody else could do the work for me. Shelby had to do the work. Shelby had to do the things that sucked, like treatment, like outpatient, like going to, doing 90 and 90 and all those things. And I'm not saying those things sucked, so don't hear what I'm not saying with that. But I'm just saying like the work that I didn't want to do before I got sober, that was the work that I was avoiding because I thought it would suck. And it literally changed my life when I just listened to other people. I took advice from people who had what I wanted, and I applied that to my life. And I worked the steps extremely thoroughly. That is one thing that I, to this day, and this is just my personal experience, I'm not saying this is true to everybody, but that changed my entire perspective on sobriety and who I am as a person and my understanding of my alcoholism. And that was what I avoided for so long. I thought I was superior to things like this. I'm like, I don't need that. But that ego of mine, it was holding me back all along.
Kept you stuck.
It kept me stuck. And until I let that ego go and I just went full on 2 feet in, full body in, like that's when things started to shift. And they talk about this, and I'm not supposed to really cross about like stuff in meetings and so forth, so I'm trying to be careful if you like hear me stutter, but like they talk about this in, I'll just say like around alcoholism, you have this spiritual awakening. Some people experience a spiritual awakening when they realize that the obsession has lifted from them, whether that's the drugs or the alcohol, whatever it is that has a hold on them. And my experience with my spiritual awakening, Matt, like was when I realized that I basically had the life and was living the life that I never thought possible before the alcohol came into the picture. Like, I never thought I could be a girl who could go to the bar and not have a drink. Like, I never thought I could be the girl who could just, like, sit at a bar or go out to eat with friends and not want a glass of wine or have fun with them without having a glass of wine. But it turned out, like, I had more fun. I was more myself. I was more present. I was able
without doing it.
Without doing it.
Did you ever think you were going to be the girl that was like training on how to eat healthy, given like your relationship with food?
It's funny you ask that because I, as somebody in high school, when I got into fitness and kind of changing my body, I tried to go about it in a way that I thought was correct too, with like changing my physique and like losing body fat. I just did it way too strict and way too extreme. But I had that passion, and I had really close friends and people tell me like, Shelby, this is your passion. Like, you should go do something with this, like with fitness. Awesome. And I was like, it's just a hobby, like whatever. And I didn't listen to what my soul was really telling me. And I tried to follow like what I thought was the correct path with college, with business, with doing
success,
all this.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like one thing that you said just like hit me is like, you were like, again, like you were a victim to that, but you said like, I am responsible for my life and for the life that I will live here on out, and I am responsible for my healing, right? How did you finally make that connection in your brain? Because you said for years you didn't live that way. Like, how did you finally be like, I am responsible? How do you, because like when I was like going through what I was going through too, I was just like, I'll just lay in bed for years until someone comes and saves me. And then I'm like, okay, no one's coming. How did you finally like click, I am responsible for my own healing, and then take the time to do it? What made you come to that realization?
I think one of the biggest things that brought me to this realization was actually through the church that I attend right now too. And the pastor said something, and I don't want to say this was like the only thing that but it solidified it for me. And he always preached about, he was so open and honest about like his mental health and his struggles. And I, from a pastor to say this, like it just brought me so much hope and so much safety, being like, everybody goes through stuff and it's okay to be open. It's okay to be honest. And what he always stood by though was that it was ultimately his responsibility to take the actions to get the help that he needed in order to overcome and get to where he is. Whereas God had, yes, the biggest part in that, but you cannot just stay in your bed and pray to God and expect it to magically just disappear. God will show you and point you in the direction that he wants you to go to be able to overcome these things. But if you are reluctant, if you are resistant to taking on those opportunities that God is slapping you in the face with, then you're not going to see the blessings that he has for you on the other side. And that was one thing that I think selfishly, like I was just thinking was going to be handed to me. Like, I'm just going to overcome alcoholism by going to rehab. Like, no, girl, there is work you have to do after. And this also took me going to therapy and actually having in-depth conversations with therapists, where it's like I had very surface level conversations maybe in like college with counselors and stuff that were like free on campus. But I took it upon myself to seek out a therapist after I did the work with treatment and with what I need to be doing for that for myself. And I sought out a therapist, and I went so deep into all of the things that I kind of just went through today.
And you were like probably so honest with yourself finally, right? Like you probably just were like, this is my story. This is what happened to me. This is what it made me feel. And like, this is the work that I need to do it to fix it, right? You probably like find, like, it sounds like you just got super, instead of like superficial, like you got real, you got deep, and you got honest about your feelings, your emotions, and your trauma, right?
Yes.
Which like was finally like, now you can, it's like really like finally acknowledging that there's a thorn inside my soul that I have to acknowledge, look at, get honest with, label, become aware of, become comfortable with. And then like one thing you've said that's so amazing so many times, Shelby, is you're like, you said it a few times, you're like, it took work. Like it's been years of work. Are you still doing therapy today?
I have a therapist, but it's not like as consistent as when I had it
when you were going through all that.
Yeah,
but it's here you are 4 years later, and you're still like, hey, like what inner work do I need to do to make this not continuously resurface, right? It's just like, and that's what's so hard is when you're in those broken states, like it's like, oh, that takes so much work to like get to where I want to get to. But like if you look at your story, it's just like, it's literally just laying one brick one day at a time. It's just like, it's taking you 4 years to get to where you're at. But it's just like you just lay a brick every day for 4 years. Like all of a sudden you have a beautiful life years down the road. But like you can't go out and build that new life in the matter of a day. You know, you just lay one brick, and like your one brick was like, I'm going to go to rehab. You start to go to rehab. Then it's just like your next brick is like, I'm going to go to church. And then like you going to church was just like a simple step on a Sunday. Like a pastor all of a sudden like has like this story that totally moves you and is like the conduit for you to like kind of turn your life around. It's just like whoever's like going through those horrible moments and experiences, it's like just do one thing that's going to serve you today versus like put you in a worse position, and then do it the next day. And you do that day over day, month over month, all of a sudden like you're at where you're at. But it's work. And it's just daily work, consistent work, but little work. Like it's not these like big, tremendous things that you have to go do to change your life.
100%. And what I'll also mention too is I didn't know, I kind of had the stigma in my mind too when it came to sober people or people that were like in recovery, which I am in recovery right now. Like that is where I myself claim to be, where I struggled with alcoholism and I'm now sober, basically. I try not to use the word overcame because it is something that I always have to be aware of, and it always is a one day at a time type of situation. But basically, what I had found when I started to really work through my alcoholism and do what I was, guided to do, I saw the most incredible people, Matt, who were also struggling with the same thing. And that stigma that I held these people to, being like these homeless people that were under the bridge and like didn't have anything, like it was the complete opposite. These are some of the best people that I've ever met in my life, people in recovery, people that struggled with alcoholism or addiction, and they overcame that and they found their higher power. They turned their life around. And I'm also going to say something, and I know this was mentioned on like one of a famous podcast. I think it was like maybe like Logan Paul's friend or something, but this quote stuck with me so much, where it's like, if you have struggled with addiction and you overcame addiction in any type of way, whether that's food, whether that's alcohol, whether that's drugs, whether that's sex, whether that's porn, and you overcame that, you have something inside of your soul. You have something that is so powerful that I believe God has instilled in you as a gift to give back to other people, to do something good with. There is a different type of movement, I think, happening in my body than maybe other people who haven't struggled with addiction. And again, this is not me saying I'm superior to them in any way, but this is the perspective that I switched to be able to see, holy crap, I have this amazing gift. I went through this traumatizing thing, but for a good reason. I needed this to happen to be placed into the position to help the people that I do now, whether that's overcoming alcohol or whether that's just getting on a better track with their health and fitness and actually living in a body that they are proud and feel strong in and feel happy with, instead of miserable and hating and self-sabotaging. And they're like completely living in an unaligned version of where God wants them to be.
Exactly.
That is exactly how I see it.
It's like, because I know that work that it takes, like to be through what I've been through and like to feel what I feel. And I'm like, my biggest win was getting out of the bed some days. But like, you have totally taken your trauma, you have climbed out, you have like dug yourself out. Like, you were the prime example of like going through absolute hell, climbing out, and then ending up at top, like on the other side of it all. And then using exactly what you went through to be able to help others, to be able to inspire others, and then like use your trauma as your like new purpose in life, which there's really like two ways you get through trauma, right? It's like, or like there's three, like you either never heal, you heal, and then like you move on and never want to talk about it again, but like you're at least healed. Mm-hmm. And then there's your like, no, I'm using this now to go help others that went through the same thing, which, just whether you move on and you never do anything with it, or whether you use it as something that's going to be like your fuel to help others, like both of those just are absolutely admirable. And you've totally done the one where you're going to use this as like a new purpose and drive for your life, which is amazing. And that's like, I want to end up like you, like I'm not 4 years into it like you are, but like I know I will be, but like I'm like almost a year into it, and it's like I can totally see how like I could use this as a opportunity to absolutely serve the person that I once was, which was broken, depressed, turn into all the vices of the world, and just like being in a horrible state emotionally and mentally. So tell me real quick though, I know like God has been a huge influence in your life through this whole experience. Mm-hmm. Like your pastor was a big influence, but like how has God specifically spoken to you? How have you sought him? Like what influence has he had on you through this experience of turning your trauma into triumph?
Yeah, no, that's a really, again, another loaded question that I could just talk on all day, but God, like I would not be where I am today at all without God. Like God is the only reason I'm here talking to you today. I know that for a fact. He helped me in so many ways. Like I've always been a believer, I never really strayed away, I would say, from believing that, I knew my God to be true, but I did stray away from my relationship with him. Or I would actually, I don't even think I ever had a real relationship with God until I got sober. I don't think I was capable. I think the devil had such a strong hold on me with my alcoholism and with just like my other control methods that like I was trying to control things like human flesh wise, like kind of how you share as well, where it's like I wasn't letting God lead. I was trying to lead. I was trying to control. I was trying to, manage drinking, moderately. I was trying to control my eating. I wasn't ever giving the reins to God. And I think there was just moments now that I look back where he was asking me to do that, but I wasn't able to. And I don't think he's mad at me like at all. I know God isn't mad at me and he forgives me so heavily to the point where his forgiveness has allowed me to stop punishing myself for the behavior, for the actions that I, partook in, that I chose to partake in, and for the actions that I punished myself for that I thought were my fault.
So you've like totally felt the forgiveness of God in your life.
100%.
How did you finally have the faith to like be like, I give you the reins? Like, how did you finally surrender and submit to him? Like, did you realize you couldn't do it without him? Or like, how did you finally get to that point of God, I'm releasing control, I'm releasing the reins, I'm giving them to you, and I submit to your will?
Yeah, I think when I knew I was done drinking alcohol, there was that moment of I was giving God the reins, because I always tried to numb or fix or blur things just using alcohol, and I was never able to let God be that person. Like I kind of mentioned before, like alcohol was my higher power. Like I would do anything to make sure I could go drink on the weekend, like hang out with people who I didn't even like. I would do anything for alcohol. If you asked me back then, I probably wouldn't have done anything for God. And I was like, yeah, I believe. Isn't that enough? But I didn't understand that was like a big reason why I was using alcohol the way I was because like I didn't have that relationship with God, and he wasn't able to speak to me or reach me because I wasn't allowing him to take control. I was just continuing to give in and feed into the devil. And I do think that he had it that way for a reason, though. I will say that he had me go through these seasons for a reason. But I do think there were times, now that I look back, that he was trying to pull me out earlier that I wasn't open to and I wasn't willing to. But now I can recognize it being sober and being clear. Like God is telling me this right now. God is speaking to me, and I am here, and I'm listening, and I am willing to follow him. And I think another big part was like the faith that I now have with God and the faith that he has showed me. Like I have now let God basically rewrite my story. Instead of erasing my story, he's having me use my story to help people and to make an impact. Not even make an impact, but change lives. And I know I say this a lot, even just in like my fitness programs, but I believe that there is so much power in just being able to take that next step in your life to make a decision to better yourself in some way, shape, or form. If you do feel that pull and that urge that you want something better for yourself, I believe that is there for a reason, and that somebody, whoever your higher power is, the universe, I don't care what it is, but I believe that is a sign for that individual that they were made for more and that they deserve more and that somebody wants more for them, but it is their responsibility to take that next step and that next action to follow that guidance.
Yeah, which is just amazing, Shelby, and I love hearing you just like go on so clearly and just so passionately about it. And you should just hold your head so high, for the work that you have done, because you did have that calling inside of you and you did respond to it, and you've done the work to get to where you're currently at, which is absolutely amazing. Like you are a perfect example of like who I want to bring on this podcast and the individuals' lives that I want to touch, because like you had very traumatic experiences from situations that were outside of your control. Then you also had, like, you just made some decisions like along the way that you just weren't proud of in general, that had nothing to do with anyone else but just your own decisions. And then, you know, it led to things that progressively got worse and worse. But like, you got honest with yourself, which is very difficult to do. You've taken the time to do the inner work through therapy and through spending your time with yourself, which is very difficult to do. It's like, then you've like spent all the energy and just like the work, that like physical work that it takes to get out of the situation that you are currently in, whether it's moving across the country or whether it's you know, just like every day in and day out, working on your mind and on your body to fix yourself. It's just like in every area of life, you have taken the time to get honest with yourself and then heal and work through your trauma. And like, you're a prime example of if an individual that's sitting at home struggling, like, and doesn't know what to do, where that individual can get to. Like, you're a perfect example of like that the sky's the limit. Like, no matter how broken, how at the bottom you are, you can turn your life around and go build the life of your dreams, and you can heal from all your trauma and become and be everything that you wanted to be despite what you had to go through. And you are an absolutely perfect example of that, walking example of that. So I just want you to know, genuinely, like, hold your head so high, because like, I want to end up like you. I look up to you. You have been a huge strength to me in my life through my trauma. And I like look at you and I'm like, look what Shelby has gone through, and look at where she's at. What I'm going through, I can end up where she is, but in my own story, you know? So I just want you to know that we see you, we understand, like, we respect you, and we like this whole community that I'm trying to build are just so grateful that you're willing to share your story so vulnerably and authentically. And just before we cut this out, because our time's up, like, do you have any last final thoughts, words that you want to say to just like about your story or about the people, or like, this is your chance to, you know, give back? Like, what, do you have anything on your mind that you'd like to say?
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
I really share what I share in total for awareness, that just because somebody's life may be perceived one way or the other does not mean that they didn't go through crap and they didn't go through storms and that they did not experience things as traumatic as the other person. You guys, that's not a thing. Somebody goes through traumatic experience A, somebody goes through traumatic experience B. Despite how vastly those different experiences can be, they are both just as valid as the other. Never try to lessen or make less of your traumatic experience just because the world or just because others are making you feel invalidated for what you experienced. What had happened to you matters, and I see you, and you are so loved, and I promise you there is better coming from it, but you just have to get through the thick of it, and I know it's going to be tough, but please know that I see you, and I know you can make it through.
Hey, but seriously, again, thank you so much for the time that you've spent, and for letting me come and just spend this last couple hours with you. It's been amazing. And
Thank
again,
you.
thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much, Matt. It was an honor.
Yeah, it was my honor.